It feels surreal to be here at the end, going into the final fight of the story. We've waited long for this, and the pacing has been all over the place. Sometimes it's long, sometimes it's short, sometimes there's barely anything to hold on to, yet I still have excitement. Reading this in a volume, I think would be so incredibly good. Just all at once, back to back, everything compiled very nicely to this moment. I'm curious. I have so many questions, so many ideas, yet the more I think about them, the more I just want to experience what Fujimoto cooks. I don't want to overthink this situation, yet I feel like I'm going to. It was not the Darkness Devil. It wasn't another primal fear. It was war. It's Yoru herself. I love her entrance. Very powerful, very grand, upholding that War Devil title. Even descending from hell, I think, is a big thing. She's probably rampaged through there as well, gaining a lot of people. And yet she stands here confident in front of Pochita, death, and famine. She has played this well. Knowing that death would be a problem, she's taken her friends hostage. I find it interesting that Death doesn't really know the scope of her own powers, probably because she doesn't necessarily use it. Yet her power is unfair, being able to kill anyone instantly. What that means for Yoru is that she has to play carefully, taking her friends hostage and basically pushing Death into a corner, into obscurity. I don't want to fight Death and Fami, I just want Chainsawman. That is the best outcome she could have hoped for. I find it funny to see that interaction between them because for the first time, Death doesn't really do anything. Seems almost kind of offended that she can't. I have a hope that perhaps somewhere within this fight, something might happen with Death and Fami, which I'm sure is a possibility, but for now, they're waiting. The real fight is obviously between Chainsawman and Yoru, and we've been building for this fight for the entire story. What would this fight look like? Catastrophic, of course. The powers between them are massive and dangerous, yet who would actually come out on top? One of the most interesting things about Chainsawman as a story and as a character, Pochita, is that we don't actually know his full potential. We've heard about versions of it through stories, him versing the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and primal fears all at once, and yet he came out barely injured with a bullet wound at the beginning of the story. We've seen him fight hybrids, we've seen him fight Makima, yet we've never seen a back and forth. There is arguments to be made there, especially for the Makima situation with him getting sent out into space and being able to resurrect himself, and there's a conversation to have about the legitimacy of his strength and how far it could actually go, but I think more than anything it's circumstantial. We know that Chainsawman or Pochita isn't just this mindless being trying to destroy everything. There's a thought process and equality. Importantly, a choice is there. I don't think this fight is going to be short by any means, but I do think we're going to run a parallel situation, which is the end half of the chapter that takes place internally. And I think running both of those ideas at the exact same time is going to lead us to the finale, to a very emotional and introspective outcome for both of these characters. Technically, we are looking at 4 separate individuals, Asa and Yoru, Denji and Pochita. Right now, we're watching a physical fight between Yoru and Pochita, but internally, at the end of the chapter, we get a young Denji meeting Asa Mitaka. Their meeting is rather symbolic and very nerve-wracking. It's always shrouded in these back alleyways that are dimly lit, very disorientating, almost like a maze, and yet they're always seeking something. For child Denji, he's seeking Pochita, and perhaps a way that you could visualize this internally, Denji, mentally trying to find his way back home. And by doing that, he needs to find Pochita. Now theoretically, you could apply this exact same sentiment to Asa, that she has been internally running through these confusing maze-like alleyways to find her way back home. This is her mental maze, and within this mental maze holds a lot of symbolic trauma and hidden agendas and identities that you kind of have to battle with. We've seen how this is developed for Denji. The greatest indication for him is the fact that he's a child within here, which is probably more legitimately to the age he was when he went through all of his trauma. So when he is introspective, this is kind of how he views himself, as a child. Naturally, that is his age before being mentally and emotionally stunted from that trauma and locking away any sort of progression or growth behind that very scary door. Simply a coping mechanism. However, for Asa, it could work a little bit differently. I don't think Asa is protecting trauma or hiding it away, or she has a trauma-related door similar to Pochita. Instead, I think Asa is a lot more introspective in general, and that she can't actually deal with a lot of the grief and anxiety and depressive situations that she has gone through. I think you'll notice a lot of the times throughout the story is that she's rather switchy. She'll kind of push things away or put things to the side or randomly flip a switch to change her personality depending on the situation that she's trying to overcome. This is what I would consider to be surviving. It's her adapting to a situation as much as possible, even if she feels really uncomfortable. So these alleyways and the representation for her, for me, is her dealing with this level of survival, trying to adapt and overcome all of the grief and trauma and the horrifying experiences that Yoru is currently putting her through, while also meshing with her own personal experiences as a human. The example for her would be the beginning of the story with the headless chicken that she killed, and then seeing that halfway through the story, a alleyway littered with all of those corpses of chickens. From a human's perspective, I imagine that is her guilt, trying to overcome that fear and anxiety that lingered within her at that time, something she kind of locks away within these alleyways to save herself. At the same time, I think it also doubles back as a representation of Yoru being this warmongering devil, littering the world with endless amounts of corpses, death and destruction quite literally at her feet. What we need to mutually understand is that Asa and Denji kind of function the same way. However, Pochita tries his best to mitigate Denji away from trauma. Any sort of bad memories or trauma, Pochita will tend to insert himself and hide it away, locking it behind physical doors as a literal manifestation. Asa doesn't necessarily have that, so the experiences that Yoru actually goes through, killing all of these people and all of these bodies and blood and death, is also on the hands of Asa, and she has to try and come to terms with that. She may not be the one mentally or emotionally doing it, but physically she's still experiencing it. What I love about this is that it's emphasized throughout the story quite often, that Asa and Yoru start to become more intertwined, that they start to share each other's emotions, that they start to feel what the other person feels. So you can imagine how that goes. Part of Yoru is going back to Asa, and Asa is going back to Yoru. Unfortunately for Asa, I imagine this won't work. Trying to understand this experience, trying to separate her human self from Yoru, who's this warmongering devil, is almost night and day. Where Pochita is of a similar caliber, he is understanding and very much protective of Denji's well-being. Yoru is not. What I think Asa is chasing here is technically herself. The same way that Denji is looking for Pochita, Asa is kind of looking for Yoru. However, there might be alternatives in here. Being able to separate Asa and Yoru is the biggest conversation throughout this story, and the more we've gone through it, the less and less it seems possible. By the end of the story, if we kill Yoru, Asa Mitaka will also die. That is a problem. But if there is a chance to actually salvage Asa's mentality, her emotions, she cannot merge with Yoru. The most interesting thing I find for this is that we've seen versions of it throughout the story. Fujimoto has teased multiple times where both Asa and Yoru will forcefully take control depending on an emotional situation. It's contextual, so depending on the heightened emotion that triggers between either of them, they may forcefully take over. And if Asa can actually do that, perhaps with the help of child Denji here, Yoru could be pushed away. Perhaps this is one way to save her, but I don't think it would be final. Part of me believes that Pochita and Denji may try to erase the War Devil, get rid of her entirely. This could save Asa, but it might come at a cost, which would be her memories. Devouring Yoru, but keeping Asa alive at the cost of her experiences, her emotions, and everything, and basically putting her back to square one. Person she originally was, with that grief and trauma, with a missing hole now inside of her. I don't know if that's possible, but I enjoy the sound of it and I think would be interesting. Their fight is building and going to be massive and destructive and really encaptures the whole world. If Pochita loses here, the world is done. Erasing things will eventually come out, and I wouldn't be surprised if even Yoru has tricks up her sleeve. I'm excited for both of these situations.